He didn't stop because he believed in miracle. He stopped because a broken dog ran into his path and refused to move. What he thought was just another wounded animal turned out to be a silent witness to something no one in town dared to speak about. The dog wasn't running to survive. It was running to lead him somewhere the truth had been buried. A missing girl, a trusted man, and a town that chose silence over justice. For the first time in years, the Navy SEAL had to decide whether to walk away or stay and fight for someone who still had a chance. Because sometimes God doesn't send a sign in the sky. He sends a wounded dog to test whether your heart is still listening. After hearing this story, how did it make you feel? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe to support more powerful stories like this. The early summer light in northern Michigan didn't feel warm. It spread across the forest road in pale sheets, reflecting off the lake like cold metal, turning everything too sharp, too exposed. The kind of light that didn't soften anything. It revealed. Beckett Vale drove straight through it. He sat behind the wheel of his old pickup with both hands steady, posture upright out of habit rather than intention. At 36, he carried himself like someone who had spent too many years training his body to react before his mind could question it. He stood about 6 feet tall, his build lean and functional, strength shaped by endurance, His face was clean-shaven, exposing a strong square jaw and pronounced cheekbones that caught the light at certain angles. His dark brown hair was cut short in a military style, though slightly longer than regulation, just enough to show distance from the system that once defined him. His skin, light by nature, had been weathered by years of cold northern wind. Not rough, but marked. Like something that had endured and chosen not to complain about it. His eyes were gray-blue and empty in a way that didn't come from fatigue. It came from restraint. He wore the same thing he always did. A worn olive-gray tactical combat shirt, the fabric softened and faded over time, frayed slightly at the wrists and shoulders. His brown-green combat pants had lost their structure, the knees worn, the cargo pockets sagging from use. Old military work boots pressed firmly against the pedals, and on his wrist a scratched, aging watch ticked with quiet persistence. There was nothing accidental about any of it. Beckett didn't choose comfort. He chose familiarity, because familiarity didn't ask questions. The road curved along the lake, dipping briefly into a stretch of forest where tall pines blocked out the horizon. The world narrowed. Trees, shadow, gravel, silence. That was when the dog appeared. It didn't run across the road. It didn't hesitate. It launched itself forward. Beckett reacted instantly. His foot slammed the brake, tires screaming against the pavement as the truck lurched to a halt. The impact was light, but enough to send the animal sliding across the road. For a moment, everything went still. No wind, no birds, no movement. Then the dog moved, slowly, painfully. It pushed itself upright. A German shepherd, male full-grown, 4, maybe 5 years old, but far too thin for its frame. Its coat, once likely a clean black and tan, was matted with dirt and dried blood. The black along its back was dull, streaked unevenly, while the tan on its legs and chest looked darker, almost bruised. Its ribs showed faintly beneath the fur. One of its hind legs dragged slightly behind the other. And around its neck, barely visible through the thick coat, was the mark of something that had once been tight. A chain. But none of that was what made Beckett stay in the driver's seat longer than necessary. It was the way the dog looked at him, not pleading, not panicked, alert. The dog held its ground in the center of the road, chest heaving, eyes locked on Beckett. Then it turned its head sharply toward the forest, then back at him. Again. As if the motion itself meant something, as if it was trying to show him. Beckett didn't move. He should have. He knew exactly what the right decision was, Assess, move on, avoid unnecessary variables. That had been drilled into him for years, but something didn't align. The dog wasn't acting like something that had just been hit. It was acting like something that had been running towards something and away from something else at the same time. And then a shape appeared in his rearview mirror. A vehicle, gray, a truck. It came around the bend behind him slowly, not fast enough to be careless, not slow enough to be cautious, just controlled. Beckett's eyes shifted between the mirror and the dog. The truck didn't honk, didn't flash lights, didn't attempt to pass. It simply reduced speed and stayed there, watching. The dog reacted first. Its entire body tightened, not in aggression, in recognition. It took one unsteady step backward toward Beckett's truck, then stopped, forcing itself to remain upright despite the tremor in its limbs. It didn't run. It didn't hide. It chose position. Between Beckett and the road behind him. Beckett exhaled slowly. There it was again. That feeling. The one he had spent years trying to forget. The moment before something goes wrong. When everything is still technically under control, but no longer safe. He turned the engine off. The silence that followed was louder than the noise had been. Then he opened the door. The dog didn't retreat as Beckett approached, but it didn't relax either. Its muscles locked in place, every inch of it braced for impact, like it had learned that proximity always came with pain. Beckett slowed his movement, no sudden gestures, no voice. He crouched slightly, extending one hand, not touching, just offering space. The dog's eyes flicked to his hand, then back to his face, measuring, deciding. Beckett moved closer, carefully. When his hand finally made contact with the fur along the dog's neck, the reaction was immediate. Not resistance, not aggression, stillness, the kind of stillness that comes from enduring something, not accepting it. Beckett's jaw tightened. "Easy," he muttered, voice low. The dog didn't respond to the word, but it didn't pull away. Behind him, the gray truck idled, waiting. Beckett didn't look back. He slid his arms beneath the dog's body. The weight surprised him. Not heavy, but dense, like something that had been holding tension for too long. The dog's breathing hitched once as it was lifted, then steadied. No struggle, no sound, just acceptance. He carried it to the passenger seat and set it down. The dog shifted slightly, claws scraping against the worn fabric, then settled, still facing forward, still watching the road. As Beckett reached across to close the passenger door, the dog's head snapped suddenly toward the rear window. Not fear, not panic. Focus. Its ears uneven, one slightly lower than the other, tilted forward, and a low, almost inaudible sound left its throat. Not a growl, not a whine, something in between. Beckett followed its gaze. The gray truck had stopped. Not close enough to confront, not far enough to be irrelevant. It stayed there for 3 seconds, 4, 5. Then, without signaling, it turned and drove away, slowly, deliberately, as if it had confirmed something. Beckett shut the door, walked around, got back into the driver's seat. He didn't start the engine right away. The dog remained still beside him, watching, breathing, alive, but not safe. Beckett reached out, parting the fur along its neck. Beneath the scars, older than they should have been, deeper than simple neglect, his fingers found something else, small, hard, embedded just beneath the skin, not a standard veterinary chip. Too shallow, too crude. His hand paused there, then slowly withdrew. He leaned back in the seat, looked at the road ahead, then at the dog. "What are you?" The dog didn't answer. But it didn't look away either. Beckett turned the key, the engine came to life, and without checking the mirror again, he pulled forward, leaving the stretch of road behind him. But the feeling didn't leave. It stayed. In the space between his shoulders, in the rhythm of his breathing, in the silence that no longer felt empty. He had been careful, for years. Careful not to get involved, careful not to let anything depend on him. Careful not to repeat the one moment that had followed him into every quiet place he had ever tried to build. But now, there was a wounded animal in his passenger seat, a tracking device under its skin, and a truck that had watched and decided not to intervene, not yet. Beckett tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He didn't believe in coincidence, not anymore. The veterinary clinic sat at the edge of town, where the asphalt thinned into gravel and the air carried the quiet mix of antiseptic hay and lake wind. It wasn't much to look at, a single-story structure with faded siding and a modest wooden porch. But it held a kind of stillness that suggested things inside were given a chance to heal. Beckett noticed that immediately. Not comfort, not warmth, but control, the kind that kept chaos from spreading. Ivy Rowan didn't look up when he carried the dog through the door. "Table," she said, already pulling on gloves. Her voice was calm, efficient, stripped of unnecessary tone, the kind of voice people develop when emotion has to be rationed carefully. She moved with purpose, mid-30s, around 5'7", slender but not fragile. Her brown hair was tied loosely at the nape of her neck, strands escaping around her temples, framing a face that carried quiet fatigue. Not exhaustion from a single day, but from a pattern of days that never quite ended. Her eyes, hazel sharp, flicked once to Beckett, taking him in with practiced speed, posture, clothes, distance, silence. Then they returned to the dog. "Set him here." Beckett did. The dog, Talon, didn't resist, but the moment Beckett's hands left his body, tension surged back into him. His muscles locked, breath shallow, eyes tracking Beckett's movement like a tether had just been stretched too far. Ivy noticed. "He's anchoring to you," she said. "I didn't do anything." "That's the point." She leaned in, examining the wounds. Up close, Talon's condition was worse than it had seemed on the road. Beneath the dirt and matted fur were layers of damage, old and new. Faint fractures that had healed unevenly. Bruising that followed patterns, not accidents. The skin around his neck told a clearer story than anything else. Pressure, repetition, control. "Long-term abuse," Ivy said, her tone tightening just slightly. "Structured." Beckett didn't respond. He stood against the wall, arms crossed, posture neutral. But his eyes never left the table. Talon's eyes never left him. "Hold him steady," Ivy said. Beckett stepped forward. The change was immediate. Talon's breathing eased, not calm, but contained. His body didn't relax, but it stopped escalating. Ivy paused for half a second, watching the interaction. Then she continued. Her hands moved carefully, efficient without being rushed. She cleaned the wounds, checked reflexes, palpated the injured hind leg. Talon flinched at certain points, not violently, but with recognition. Pain, he expected, not feared. That was worse. When Ivy reached his neck, she stopped. Her fingers pressed gently beneath the fur, then again more deliberately. "There's something here." Beckett stepped closer. She shaved a small patch. The object beneath the skin became visible. A small, crude implant, slightly off-center, not positioned where any legitimate microchip would be placed. Ivy leaned back slightly. "That's not veterinary. What is it?" She hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because she was deciding how much to say. "Tracking device," she said finally. "Cheap, illegal, used in certain training environments." Beckett's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. "Who tracks a dog like this?" Ivy met his eyes. "Someone who doesn't see it as a dog." Silence settled, the kind that carried weight. "You can leave him here overnight," Ivy said, removing her gloves, "but he's not going to handle separation well." "I'm not keeping him." She nodded once. "I heard you the first time." No judgment. No persuasion, just acknowledgement. Then, "But if you walk out that door and don't come back, he's going to crash, not physically, mentally." Beckett looked at Talon. The dog's head was slightly raised now, eyes fixed on him. Not pleading, not hopeful. Waiting. Beckett exhaled slowly. "Huh? I'll take him." Ivy didn't smile. She simply turned back to her counter. "Good." The drive back was quiet. Talon lay on the passenger seat, wrapped loosely in a blanket Ivy had handed him. He didn't sleep. His eyes tracked the road, the trees, the shifting light, always forward, always aware. Beckett noticed that. Animals that had been broken didn't look outward, they folded inward. This one didn't. The cabin sat alone on a low rise overlooking the lake, surrounded by open ground and a thin line of trees beyond. It wasn't large, it wasn't comfortable, it was contained. Everything inside had a place. Everything outside had distance. Beckett parked, opened the passenger door. Talon didn't move. He waited. Beckett stepped back. After a moment, Talon climbed down on his own. Slow, careful, favoring the injured leg, but determined. He didn't wander. He stayed close, not touching, just within reach. Beckett pointed toward the porch. "You stay out here." Talon didn't respond to the words, but he understood the boundary. He settled near the door, facing outward. Night came quietly, no storm, no wind, just the low hum of distance. Beckett sat inside, boots off, back against the wall, watching the door without meaning to. He told himself it was habit, observation, control, but the truth sat just beneath it. He was waiting. The sound came just after midnight, metal, dragged, faint but distinct, not close enough to locate, not far enough to ignore. Talon reacted instantly. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He froze. Every muscle locked in place, head low, ears angled back, eyes wide but not seeing the room anymore. He wasn't here. Beckett stood, opened the door. Talon didn't run. He crawled toward Beckett, stopped just short, then turned. Looked at the empty space inside the cabin, and slowly, deliberately lowered himself in front of it, blocking it. Beckett's jaw tightened. He had seen this before. Men who came back from places they couldn't leave, who reacted to sounds that weren't present, who protected things that weren't there anymore. He crouched beside Talon, not touching, just present. "It's not here," he said quietly. Talon didn't respond, but after a long moment, his breathing shifted, not calm, but closer. Hours later, the cabin fell silent again, but Beckett didn't sleep. Morning came pale and slow. Beckett moved through routine, water, coffee, checking the perimeter, not because anything had changed, but because routine was the only thing that kept the edges from slipping. Talon followed, not closely but consistently. When Beckett knelt to clean dirt from Talon's paws, he found it. A small piece of fabric caught between the pads. Old, worn, not from the environment, from somewhere else. He pulled it free. Cloth, child-sized. 2 letters stitched in faded thread. E.M. Talon watched him the entire time. Not curious, not confused, as if he already knew what Beckett was holding. Beckett drove back to the clinic. Ivy took the fabric without comment, turning it over in her fingers. "Not from around here," she said. "You sure?" She nodded. "Material's different. Stitching, too. Someone cared about this once." Beckett leaned against the counter. "And now?" Ivy looked up. "Now it ended up under a dog's paw in the middle of nowhere." Silence again, but different this time. Heavier. "You're going to look into it," she said. It wasn't a question. Beckett didn't answer. Talon, who had been lying near the door, suddenly stood, not abruptly, but with purpose. His head turned toward the window, body angled slightly, still focused. Ivy followed his gaze. There was nothing there, just the empty stretch of gravel road, morning light, no movement. But Talon didn't relax, his breathing slowed, not fear, recognition. Beckett stepped closer to the window. Nothing, no car, no figure, no sound, and yet something had just passed, not seen, but noticed. Beckett turned back. Talon's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no confusion in them, only certainty. Beckett didn't say anything, but something inside him shifted, not belief, not yet, but acknowledgement. That night the sound came again, not metal this time, engine, low, controlled, stopping somewhere beyond the tree line. Beckett didn't go outside, he didn't reach for a weapon, he sat still, listening, measuring distance, timing. Talon stood, no shaking, no freezing, just standing, facing the door. Minutes passed. The engine cut, silence returned. Beckett finally spoke, quiet, certain. "They're not guessing anymore." He looked at the door, then at the dog. "They know where you are." Talon didn't move, but he didn't look away either. The town looked too clean, not polished, not artificial, just maintained in a way that suggested effort without explanation. The kind of place where things were kept in order, not because they were simple, but because no one wanted to disturb whatever balance had already been negotiated. Morning light spread across the lakefront, soft and bright, catching on the docks and small boats tied along the shore. Wind moved lightly through the pines, carrying the scent of water and old wood. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. Beckett parked his truck near the general store and stepped out, Talon following a second later. The dog moved differently now, still cautious, still measured, but no longer collapsing into himself at every unfamiliar sound. He stayed close, not out of fear, but out of decision. That difference mattered. Beckett noticed it. He also noticed how quickly people noticed them. Not openly, not obviously, but in the small pauses, conversations that stopped half a beat too soon, glances that didn't linger long enough to be called staring, doors that closed just a little quicker than necessary. He'd seen that before, not in war zones, in places where people had already decided what was safer not to know. Inside the store, the air smelled faintly of coffee and dust. Shelves lined the narrow aisles stocked with practical things, canned food, rope, batteries, tools, nothing unnecessary. A man stood behind the counter, late 50s, maybe early 60s, thick build that had softened with age but still carried weight like it had once been solid muscle. His hair was gray, cropped short, and his beard, uneven, not fully maintained, gave his face a rough edge that time hadn't quite worn down. His name tag read Hank Doyle. His eyes lifted as Beckett entered. Sharp, not unfriendly, just aware. "You passing through?" Hank asked. Beckett shook his head. "Staying up the ridge." Hank nodded once. Didn't ask more, but his gaze shifted to Talon, paused there, just long enough to register, then back to Beckett. "That your dog?" "Found him." Hank grunted softly. "That's so." It wasn't disbelief. It wasn't agreement either. Just acknowledgement of a statement he wasn't going to challenge. Beckett moved through the store slowly, picking up what he needed without urgency. Coffee, canned goods, a roll of gauze, antiseptic, routine, control, but his attention wasn't on the items, it was on the space between people. The silence. He spoke once more, casual, as if it didn't matter. "Anyone around here lose dogs?" Hank didn't answer right away. He wiped the counter with a rag that had already done its job. "Strays come through sometimes." "That's not what I asked." Hank's eyes lifted again. This time they held, longer. Then he leaned back slightly, resting his weight against the shelf behind him. "You ask too directly," he said. Beckett didn't respond. Hank continued. "People around here don't like questions that sound like answers." "What kind of answers?" Hank's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "The kind that make things worse." Outside, the light hadn't changed, but the town felt different, not quieter, just more deliberate. Beckett drove down toward the docks. Wood creaked underfoot as he stepped onto the long, weathered pier. The lake stretched out ahead, calm and wide, reflecting the sky in a way that made distance hard to measure. Talon paused halfway down, not stopping, not retreating, just recalibrating. His head tilted slightly, ears shifting, body angling towards something Beckett couldn't immediately see. Then Beckett noticed the boy. He stood near the far edge of the dock, leaning against one of the posts, small for his age, 11 maybe, thin in a way that suggested he'd grown faster than he'd filled out. His hoodie hung loose on his frame, sleeves slightly too long, hands tucked into the pockets as if he preferred to keep them hidden. His hair was light brown, unevenly cut, like it had been done without much attention. His face carried something older than his age, not hardness, not exactly, but a kind of quiet calculation. He watched before he spoke. That was the first thing Beckett noticed. The second was that the boy didn't look at him first. He looked at the dog, and when he did, he froze. Not dramatically, not fearfully, just stopped. "That one shouldn't be alive," the boy said. His voice was soft, flat, like he was stating a fact, not offering an opinion. Beckett stepped closer. "Why not?" The boy didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on Talon. Talon didn't move, didn't growl, didn't retreat. But something in his posture shifted, subtle, almost invisible but present. His weight moved slightly forward, his focus narrowing. Recognition, not of the boy, of something the boy represented. "What's your name?" Beckett asked. The boy hesitated, then, "Eli." "Eli what?" "Mercer." Beckett nodded once. "Why shouldn't he be alive, Eli?" Eli swallowed, not from fear, from restraint. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "Because the ones that come from there don't come back." Beckett's expression didn't change. "From where?" Eli shook his head, a small movement, but final. Talon took a single step forward, slow, controlled. He didn't approach Eli. He moved past Beckett slightly, just enough to shift his line of sight. Then he stopped and stared at the water, not the surface, something beyond it. His ears tilted forward, his breathing slowed, focused. Eli noticed. His expression changed, not to fear, not to surprise, but to something closer to recognition. "He does that," Eli murmured. "Does what?" "Looks like that." Beckett followed Talon's gaze. There was nothing in the water, no movement, no reflection out of place, just light, just distance. But Eli stepped back slightly, not away from Beckett, away from the direction Talon was facing. "He used to do that too," Eli said. "Who?" Eli didn't answer. He turned, walked off the dock, didn't run, didn't look back. Beckett stood there a moment longer. Then, "Talon." The dog didn't respond immediately. Then slowly he shifted his attention back, returned to Beckett's side. The air felt colder, not in temperature, in meaning. On the drive back, Beckett didn't turn on the radio, didn't speak. He replayed the conversation in fragments, not the words but the pauses between them. The ones that come from there. Not stray behavior, not rumor. Something specific, something learned. The cabin came into view. Nothing looked out of place. That was the first sign. Beckett slowed. Didn't pull in right away. He scanned the perimeter, ground, tree line, door. Then he saw it. Tire tracks, fresh, not his, not old enough to belong to yesterday. He parked, stepped out. Talon followed immediately, closer than before, not hesitant. Alert. The tracks led up to the front of the cabin. Stopped. Then reversed. No wandering. No hesitation. Whoever had come knew exactly where they were going, and exactly how long they needed. Beckett approached the door, slow, controlled. His hand rested lightly against the handle, but he didn't open it yet. He looked at the wood. That's when he saw it. A mark, carved, not deep, not decorative, deliberate. Return it, not a threat, not a warning, a command. Beckett opened the door. Inside was unchanged. Nothing moved, nothing taken, nothing disturbed, but the space felt different, not violated, observed. Behind him, Talon stepped in, paused, then turned, not toward the door, toward the interior, his body aligned slightly in front of Beckett, positioning again. Beckett closed the door quietly, didn't lock it. Locks didn't matter here. "They came close enough to leave that," Beckett said. He wasn't speaking to the dog, but the dog listened anyway. "They didn't take you." Talon didn't react. "They could have." Still nothing. Beckett exhaled slowly. "They're waiting." Talon shifted slightly. Not restless, not afraid, ready. Beckett looked at the carved words again, then at the dog, then at the window, the tree line beyond. Still, quiet, too quiet. Eli didn't speak right away. He stood at the edge of the clearing near Beckett's cabin, hands buried deep in the front pocket of his oversized hoodie, shoulders slightly hunched as if bracing against something that wasn't weather. The morning air was still, but his posture suggested tension that didn't come from the environment. Beckett didn't rush him. He had learned a long time ago that silence, when given space, tended to reveal more than pressure ever could. Talon stood beside Beckett, body aligned forward, ears shifting subtly with each sound in the distance. He wasn't fixated on Eli. Not exactly, but he was aware that was the difference now. "You weren't supposed to bring him here," Eli said finally. His voice was quiet but not weak. There was something underneath it, something that had been building for a long time and had simply run out of places to stay hidden. Beckett's gaze remained steady. "Why not?" Eli looked up then. Not fully, just enough. "Because they look for things like him." Beckett didn't ask who they were. Not yet. "Start from the beginning," he said instead. Eli swallowed, then, "My cousin, Emma." The name settled into the air, not unfamiliar, just waiting for context. "She disappeared 3 months ago," Eli continued. "They said she ran away." He shook his head, a small movement, controlled. "But she didn't." Beckett watched him closely. "What makes you sure?" Eli's jaw tightened. "She doesn't leave things unfinished." That wasn't the kind of answer a child gave casually. It wasn't emotion. It was observation. Eli shifted his weight, glancing briefly toward Talon. "She used to go out into the woods," he said. "Past where people walk. Past where it makes sense." "For what?" Eli hesitated. Then, "To feed something." Beckett's attention sharpened. "What kind of something?" Eli shook his head again. "I never saw it. Not clearly." Talon moved slightly at that, not toward Eli. Toward the tree line behind him, Eli noticed. His voice dropped. "But I heard it once." Beckett waited. Eli's fingers tightened inside his hoodie pocket. "Chains," he said. The word landed harder than it should have, not because of what it meant, because of how easily it connected. Beckett turned toward the truck. "Get me something of hers." Eli blinked. "What?" "Something she wore, something she kept close." Eli didn't argue. He ran. When he came back, he was breathing hard, holding a folded piece of clothing in both hands. A jacket, small, worn, faded denim with frayed cuffs and a tear near the pocket that had been stitched up by someone who cared more about function than appearance. "Her favorite," Eli said. Beckett took it, held it for a moment, then knelt beside Talon. "Talon," he said quietly. The name felt deliberate, grounding. He held the jacket out. Talon leaned forward, sniffed once. Then again, his body shifted. Not in curiosity, not in recognition the way a dog might track a scent. This was different. He lowered himself slowly, front legs bending, head dipping. A low sound escaped his throat, not loud, not urgent, but heavy. Eli stepped back. "What's he doing?" Beckett didn't answer. Talon lifted his head, looked at Beckett, then at the jacket. Then, without warning, he turned and moved, not running, not rushing, but with purpose, toward the edge of the clearing. Beckett stood immediately. "Stay close," he said. Eli hesitated, then followed. The forest changed quickly once they crossed the first line of trees. Light thinned, sound shifted. The ground softened underfoot, pine needles damp and layered, muting their steps. Talon moved ahead of them, but not far, always within sight, always within reach. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Beckett tracked everything, footing, wind direction, sound. There were signs, subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking. Compressed earth near the edge of the trail, broken branches at shoulder height. Not natural, not random. Movement, recent. They walked for nearly 20 minutes before Talon slowed, then stopped. The structure emerged gradually from the trees, a low building, wood and metal. Once painted, now weathered. The roof sagged slightly on one side, but the foundation held. It wasn't abandoned. It had been neglected, then used again. Beckett raised a hand. Eli stopped behind him. Talon didn't move forward. He stood still, watching. Beckett approached the building slowly. The door hung slightly ajar. Not forced. Left. The smell hit first. Not strong. Not fresh. But present. Chemical. Animal. Contained. Inside, the space was larger than it appeared from outside. Divided. Sectioned. Temporary structures built within a permanent shell. Chains fixed to beams, hooks along the walls, metal rings embedded in the floor. Eli covered his mouth. Beckett didn't react outwardly, but his breathing shifted. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic. "Stay by the door," Beckett said. Eli nodded. Didn't argue. Beckett moved deeper inside. The floor showed signs of cleaning. Not thorough, but recent. There were marks where something had been removed, dragged, loaded. Talon stepped in, one paw, then another, and stopped, his entire body locked, not from fear, not from pain, but from something deeper. His head turned slowly toward the far wall. There was nothing there, just wood, just shadow. But Talon lowered himself again. Same posture, same sound, low, controlled. And then he shifted, just slightly, positioning himself between Beckett and that empty space. Beckett's pulse slowed. Not accelerated, slowed, the way it used to before something revealed itself. He stepped toward the wall, carefully, measured. There, faint, barely visible, scratched into the wood. Words, "No one will believe me," not old, not faded, new. Beckett stared at it, then at Talon. "This is where she was," Eli whispered from behind him. Beckett didn't turn. "How do you know?" Eli's voice shook, not from fear, from certainty. "She writes like that." Beckett stepped closer to the wall, ran his fingers lightly across the grooves, fresh enough to still hold texture, not desperate, not rushed, deliberate. She had time. That was worse. A sound cut through the air, sharp, high-pitched, not loud but precise. Talon collapsed, not gradually, not controlled. His body dropped instantly, limbs rigid, eyes wide but unfocused. No movement, no response. Eli stumbled backward. "What's wrong with him?" Beckett was already moving. He dropped beside Talon, hand firm against his side. "Talon!" No reaction. The sound came again, fainter this time, but still present. Beckett looked up. Nothing, no movement, no shadow, but someone was there. He grabbed Talon, lifted him. The dog's body was heavy, not resisting, not helping. "Move," Beckett said. Eli didn't hesitate. They left the building quickly, not running, but not slow. The moment they crossed back into the open, Talon gasped. His body jerked. Air rushed into his lungs. His eyes snapped back into focus. He didn't look around. Didn't orient. He looked at Beckett. Beckett set him down. Talon stayed close, closer than before. Eli stood a few steps away, breathing hard. "They were here," he said. Beckett didn't answer. He looked back at the building, then at the forest around it. Empty, still, too still. For the first time in years, Beckett felt it fully. Not memory, not regret, pursuit, not being hunted, hunting back. The forest no longer felt like a place. It felt like a pattern. Beckett stood at the edge of the tree line just beyond his cabin. Eyes fixed on the narrow path leading back toward the abandoned structure they had found earlier. The morning had come and gone without ceremony. Light filtered through the branches, but it didn't soften anything anymore. Not after what he had seen. Not after what Talon had done. Talon stood beside him, closer than before, not touching but no longer leaving space. His coat had begun to dry and settle, revealing more of its natural black and tan contrast beneath the dirt and damage. The asymmetry in his ears was clearer now, one standing firm while the other angled slightly like something that had healed but never fully corrected. His body was still lean, still marked. But there was something else now. Intent. Beckett crouched down, running a hand briefly along Talon's back, not as reassurance and not as comfort. Assessment. The dog didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, but his muscles tightened slightly under the contact. Not fear, awareness. "You don't lead," Beckett said quietly. Talon didn't react. "You react." Beckett stood again. He wasn't guessing anymore, he was mapping. By mid-morning, they were back in town, not to ask questions this time, to observe. Beckett parked near the edge of the main road, far enough from the center that he could watch without being obvious. Talon remained in the passenger seat, eyes scanning the environment through the windshield, not randomly, deliberately tracking motion. Beckett watched the road, not traffic, patterns. It didn't take long. A truck passed, large, white, unmarked. Talon's head shifted slightly, not dramatically and not with panic, but with precision. His ears tilted forward, his breathing slowed, focused. Beckett followed the truck with his eyes. It didn't speed, didn't hesitate, just continued. Another vehicle passed moments later, different size, different direction. Talon didn't react. Beckett leaned back slightly in his seat. "There it is," he murmured. He started the engine, not aggressively, not urgently, just enough to move. They followed at a distance, not close enough to be noticed, not far enough to lose sight. The truck didn't head toward the highway. It turned down a service road, one that didn't appear on any standard map. Beckett slowed, watched, let the distance grow. Then he turned. The road narrowed quickly. Gravel became dirt. Dirt became something closer to a trail. Beckett stopped the truck before the path became too obvious. He stepped out. Talon followed immediately. The air felt heavier here. Not forest. Not clean. There was something beneath it. Fuel, metal. Talon paused. Not frozen, not overwhelmed, processing. Beckett crouched beside him. "Easy." Talon lowered his head slightly, then stepped forward. They moved on foot, slow, measured. The trail curved through a line of trees before opening into a small clearing. Not large, not obvious, but enough. There were tracks, multiple, different sizes, recent. Beckett knelt, brushing his fingers lightly across the compressed soil. Not random movement, repetition, same vehicles, same direction. This wasn't a drop point. This was a route. Behind him, Talon shifted, not toward the tracks, not toward the clearing, toward something else. Talon stepped away from the visible path. Just one step, then another. He lowered his head, inhaled slowly, deeply, then he stopped, not because he was unsure, because he had reached something. Beckett followed. 2 steps, 3. There was nothing there, no structure, no visible trace, just ground, just forest. And yet Talon sat, not lying down, not bracing, just sitting, looking at a patch of earth no different from anything around it. Beckett studied the area carefully. Nothing. Then a faint sound reached him. Not mechanical, not metallic. Human. He moved quickly, brushing aside the top layer of pine needles. There it was, half buried, small, plastic, a device. Beckett picked it up and turned it over in his hand. A recorder. Old. Battery nearly drained. He pressed play. Static filled the air for a moment, then a voice. Young, female, weak, but controlled. "If anyone finds him..." The recording cut. Silence followed. Beckett stared at the device, then at Talon. The dog didn't look at him. He looked at the ground, waiting. Beckett exhaled slowly. "You weren't trying to get away?" he said quietly. Talon's ear flicked slightly. "You were trying to get out." Beckett stood. This wasn't random. This wasn't isolated. This was a system. They returned to the truck without speaking. The drive back felt different. Not quieter, not heavier, clearer. By the time they reached the edge of town, Beckett already knew what he needed next. He didn't go to the store. He didn't go to the dock. He went to Eli. The boy was sitting on the steps outside a small house near the lake, elbows resting on his knees, head lowered. He didn't look surprised when Beckett approached. He looked like he had been expecting this moment. "You saw something," Beckett said. It wasn't a question. Eli didn't deny it. "They put her in the back," he said quietly. Beckett remained still. "A truck," Eli continued, "with a cage." He swallowed. "She wasn't alone." Beckett's jaw tightened. "How many?" Eli shook his head. "I didn't count." "Why didn't you say anything?" Eli's eyes lifted. For the first time, there was something close to anger in them. "Because the man driving—" He stopped, then finished. "Everyone knows him." Beckett didn't push further. He didn't need the name yet. He had the pattern, the route, the system, and now a reason. Back at the cabin, the light had begun to fade. Beckett stood on the porch, looking out toward the tree line. Talon sat beside him, not restless, not tense, present. Beckett spoke quietly. "To stay is to go back." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The past wasn't abstract. It was a moment, a hesitation, a decision that had cost someone their life. He had built his entire existence around not repeating that, around distance, control, avoidance. But distance didn't erase anything. It only delayed it. Beckett looked down at Talon. "You don't choose who depends on you." The dog didn't react. "You choose whether you stay." Silence followed. Then Beckett turned and stepped inside. Not away, forward. People had already decided she was gone. That was how it worked in places like this. Not because they had proof, because they needed the silence to hold. Beckett had told himself the same thing at first. It made things easier, contained, final. But Talon had never acted like something had ended. He didn't search, he didn't wander, he didn't circle back to places of loss. He waited. That was the difference, and Beckett had learned to trust differences. The lake stretched wide beneath the late afternoon light, its surface calm enough to reflect the sky in broken silver. From the ridge above, it looked empty, but Beckett wasn't looking at the water. He was looking at what wasn't being used. There were docks along the main shore, boats tied neatly, clear access points, predictable routes. He ignored all of them. Instead, his attention shifted to the far edge. A small island, barely noticeable, no dock, no clear path, just a patch of trees rising slightly above the waterline. Not abandoned, not used, forgotten. Talon stood beside him, body angled toward that direction. Not tense, not triggered, focused. Beckett pulled a folded photograph from his pocket. It was the only one Eli had. Emma, 17 maybe, standing beside the lake, hair pulled back loosely, strands escaping around her face. Light brown, almost sun-faded at the ends. Her posture wasn't posed. It was natural, slightly angled, as if she had been in motion when the photo was taken. Her eyes were the detail that held, steady, aware, the kind of look that didn't rely on being believed. Beckett lowered the photo in front of Talon. "Look." Talon didn't sniff, didn't recoil. He studied it, then shifted his gaze toward the lake again. Same direction, same point. That was enough. The boat Beckett used wasn't meant for distance. Old, metal hull, functional. It had been sitting near the lower dock of his property for years, rarely touched. Today it started on the second try. The engine cut through the water with a low, steady vibration. Talon sat near the front, balanced, despite the movement, eyes fixed ahead. He didn't scan, he didn't react, he watched. The closer they got, the quieter the world seemed. Not because the lake changed, because everything else fell away. The island had no dock. Beckett guided the boat to the shallower side, letting it grind lightly against the edge before cutting the engine. Silence returned immediately. He stepped out first, boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. Talon followed without hesitation. The ground here was different, not untouched, but not frequently used. Beckett moved slowly, scanning the tree line. The cabin revealed itself gradually. Low, weathered, partially hidden by branches and overgrowth. From a distance it could be mistaken for debris. Up close it was something else, maintained, just enough. The door was closed, not locked. Beckett approached from the side, not directly. Angles mattered. He paused before the entrance, listened. Nothing, no movement, no sound. Then he pushed the door open. The interior was dim. Filtered light slipped through narrow windows, outlining shapes without revealing everything at once. The air smelled faintly of wood and something else. Warmth. Recent. Beckett stepped inside. Talon followed, closer than usual. The space was small, functional, a table, a cot, supplies stacked neatly against one wall. Nothing excessive, nothing random, not abandoned. Beckett moved through the room slowly. No signs of struggle, no signs of chaos. That was wrong. Talon stopped mid-step, not frozen, not collapsing. He lifted his head, inhaled, then turned, not toward the door, not toward Beckett, toward the wall. He walked to it carefully, then sat, not in fear, not in hesitation, in recognition. Beckett followed. At first there was nothing, just wood, just surface. Then he saw it. A drawing, faint, made with something crude, a tall figure, standing. Beside it, a dog, above them a circle like a sun. The lines were uneven but intentional. Beneath it, carved shallowly into the wood, "He will hear him." Beckett stared at it, then at Talon. "You were here," he said quietly. Talon didn't move. He didn't need to. Beckett stepped back, scanning again. Now the room felt different, not a place of captivity, a place of waiting. His eyes dropped to the floor, near the cot, a stain, dark, still fresh enough to hold shape, blood, not much, but not old. Talon's head lifted, his breathing changed, not fear, recognition. Beckett knelt, pressed his fingers lightly against the edge, still tacky, recent. "She's not gone," he said. The words didn't sound like hope. They sounded like confirmation. He stood, moved toward the back of the cabin, a second door partially open, leading outside. The ground behind it showed disturbance, footprints, not clean, not staged, movement, recent, one set smaller, lighter, running. Beckett followed the direction briefly, then stopped. The trail didn't end. It had been erased, covered deliberately. He turned back toward the cabin. Talon was already at the doorway, watching him, waiting. Beckett looked across the island, the trees, the water beyond, then back at the cabin. Everything aligned. This wasn't where they kept her. This was where she had been and where she had left from. Beckett stepped inside one last time. Looked again at the drawing, at the carved words, "He will hear him." He didn't fully understand it. Not yet. But it mattered. He turned. Talon. The dog moved immediately, falling into place beside him. They left the cabin together. The light outside hadn't changed, but the meaning of everything had. Back at the boat, Beckett moved without hesitation. Not fast, precise, because now time wasn't theoretical. It was real. He looked out across the lake, not at where they came from, at where they hadn't gone yet. For the first time in years, Beckett didn't feel like a man trying to avoid what came next. He felt like someone already inside it. The rescue didn't happen in darkness, it happened in full daylight. That was the first thing Beckett noticed. No shadows to hide in, no cover to rely on. Everything was visible, everything was exposed, and for the first time since this had begun, he didn't want it any other way. The morning air over the northern Michigan ridge carried a clarity that felt almost unnatural after days of tension. The sky stretched wide and pale blue, the lake reflecting light in sharp, broken fragments beneath the wind. Beckett stood at the edge of the gravel turnout overlooking a narrow logging road that cut through the trees below. Talon stood beside him, still, grounded, different. The tremor that once lived in his body had not disappeared. But it no longer controlled him. Now it was something he carried, and chose not to obey. Beckett adjusted his stance slightly, weight balanced evenly, shoulders relaxed but ready. He wore the same worn olive-gray tactical combat shirt, the fabric softened and faded at the cuffs and shoulders. paired with his weathered combat pants and old boots that had seen more terrain than most men ever would. Nothing about him looked new. Nothing about him needed to be. What mattered was how he stood, and this time, he wasn't holding back. Eli crouched behind a fallen log a few yards back, small frame tense but steady. The boy's light brown hair fell unevenly across his forehead, and his gray-blue eyes moved constantly, tracking every shift in the open space below. He had insisted on coming. Beckett hadn't argued. There were things a boy needed to see for himself. There were truths that couldn't be explained from a distance. "I see it," Eli whispered. Beckett didn't respond. He had already seen it. The truck, white, unmarked, moving slower than necessary. Careful, controlled, not nervous. That told him everything. The vehicle came to a stop near a break in the trees. The driver stepped out. A man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. Broad shoulders, thick through the torso. The kind of build that came from years of physical work rather than training. His hair was dark but graying at the sides, cut short but uneven, like he maintained it himself without much care. His face was the kind people trusted too easily, weathered, familiar, the kind of man who had been part of the town long enough that no one questioned his presence anymore. His name came back to Beckett without effort. Harland Crow. The kind of name that didn't raise suspicion. The kind that stayed in conversations without ever becoming the center of one. Crow walked to the back of the truck, opened it. No rush, no hesitation. That meant he didn't think anyone was watching. That was his first mistake. Beckett's gaze shifted slightly. Two more men stepped out from the passenger side. Younger, less composed. One tall and narrow with sharp features and restless movements. The other shorter, heavier, with a shaved head and a habit of scanning too quickly, missing more than he caught. They weren't in control, they followed. That meant Crow was the one who mattered. The back of the truck opened, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, movement, slow, unsteady. A figure stepped down. Emma. She looked smaller than Beckett expected. Not in height, in presence. Her frame was thin, her movements careful, like each step required thought before execution. Her light brown hair hung loose now, dirt streaked through it, strands clinging to her face where sweat and time had settled. Her skin had lost color, but not awareness. Her eyes lifted, scanning, measuring, not broken, not gone, present, alive. Talon didn't move. That was the second thing Beckett noticed. He didn't lunge, didn't bark, didn't react the way a dog might after being separated. He stood, waiting. Beckett understood why. This wasn't the moment to break. This was the moment to hold. Beckett stepped forward, not fast, not hidden, open, deliberate. Gravel shifted under his boots, the sound carrying clearly through the space. Crow turned. His expression didn't change immediately. That told Beckett something too. He wasn't surprised. He was calculating. "Well," Crow said, voice calm, almost conversational, "I was wondering when someone would get curious." Beckett didn't stop walking. Talon moved with him. Perfect alignment. Crow's eyes flicked down briefly to the dog. Recognition. Then something else. Annoyance. "You should have left that animal where you found it," Crow added. Beckett stopped a few yards away, close enough. Not close enough. "You should have left her alone," Beckett replied. The younger men shifted slightly. Uneasy. They weren't prepared for this kind of confrontation. Not in daylight. Not without control. Crow exhaled slowly. "You don't understand what you've stepped into." Beckett's expression didn't change. "I do." That was the difference. Crow studied him for a moment longer. Then his gaze hardened. The kind of look that came when a man realized control was slipping. "Take him," Crow said quietly. The taller man moved first, fast, but not trained. Beckett adjusted once. A step, a shift. A controlled movement that ended before the other man realized he had already lost balance. The second man hesitated. That was enough. He never fully committed. Crow stepped back, not running, repositioning, still thinking he could regain this, but the structure had already broken. Talon moved then, not toward Crow, not toward the men, toward Emma, slow, measured. He stopped a few feet away from her, didn't jump, didn't push, just stood. Emma stared at him. For a second. Nothing. Then something inside her changed. Her shoulders dropped, just slightly. Her breath shifted. She stepped forward, hands trembling, but certain. And then she knelt, wrapped her arms around him. Talon didn't move, didn't react. He allowed it. That was the moment, not the fight, not the capture. That. Beckett watched, not as a hero, not as someone who had fixed anything, just as someone who had arrived, this time, in time. Behind him, movement, sirens in the distance, low at first, then rising. Marlon Pike had done his part. The call had been made. The silence had been broken. Crow didn't run. That told Beckett everything about the kind of man he was. He believed even now that this could be contained, that the town would still protect him, that people would still choose quiet over truth. He was wrong. Deputy Alara Voss stepped out of the first vehicle that arrived, her posture straight, movements precise. Early 40s, sharp features, dark blonde hair pulled tight at the back of her head. Her uniform was worn but clean, her presence controlled in a way that came from years of working in places where decisions mattered. She took in the scene in seconds. No hesitation, no confusion. "Everyone stays where they are," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The two younger men complied immediately. Crow didn't. Not at first, but when Alara's gaze settled on him, he stopped. Because for the first time, someone wasn't looking away. The arrest happened without chaos, without resistance, without noise. That was how things ended when they had already been decided. Eli stepped out from behind the log slowly. He didn't run, didn't rush. He walked toward Emma. He stopped a few feet away, didn't touch her, didn't speak. Emma looked up, met his eyes, and something passed between them. Not relief, not yet, recognition. Ivy Rowan arrived later, her dark hair tied low, a few loose strands framing a face that carried both exhaustion and quiet strength. She moved quickly, kneeling beside Emma, checking her condition with practiced hands. "She's dehydrated," Ivy said, "but she'll make it." Beckett nodded once. That was enough. Talon stayed close, not pressing, not guarding, just present. Emma looked up at Beckett then, really looked. "You came," she said. Beckett didn't answer immediately because there wasn't a clean answer. Because it wasn't about him. Emma's hand rested lightly against Talon's neck. "I knew you would," she added. Beckett exhaled quietly. "Talon knew," she said. That was closer to the truth. Beckett looked down at the dog. Talon didn't move, didn't look for direction, didn't need to lead anymore. He simply stayed, and for the first time in a long time. Beckett did too. Not because he had to, because he chose to. Sometimes we think miracles arrive as something overwhelming, something loud, undeniable, impossible to ignore. But more often, they come quietly. They come as a moment you almost drive past, a voice you almost don't hear, a life you almost decide is not your responsibility. In this story, the miracle was not just that a man saved a broken dog, or that a girl was found in time. The miracle was that someone chose to stop, chose to listen, chose to stay when it would have been easier to walk away. God does not always change the world in one instant. Sometimes he places something fragile in your path, not to test your strength, but to awaken your heart. Beckett didn't become a hero because he was fearless. He became someone worth remembering because this time, he did not turn away from what mattered. And maybe in your life, the same thing is happening. Maybe your miracle doesn't look like a miracle yet. Maybe it looks like responsibility, like interruption, like something that asks more from you than you feel ready to give. But what if that is exactly how God works? Through small choices, through quiet moments, through the decision to care when no one is watching. If this story touched something inside you, don't ignore it. Share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story that might speak directly to your heart. And wherever you are right now, may God watch over you, guide your steps, protect your path, and remind you that even in your hardest moments, you are never alone.